Hey, hello, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here on the Makeup Historian. I'm super excited to have you here with us. And I can't wait for everyone to hear a little bit more about your journey, your career, your story. Um, but before I give you a chance to do that, for everyone listening, just to give you a little bit of background about Andrea, I've asked her here on the show because of her insight in communications. She's a communication strategist for the Lincoln Club of Orange County, and also her insight into the beauty industry, more specifically cosmetics, things going on with the ladies. And then also, we're going to kind of dive into what it means to be a conservative woman today. So, once again, thank you, Andrea, for being here. And for those listening, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sarah, for having me on your podcast.
Of
It's
course.
such an honor. I know we've been talking about this for so long, and it feels so nice to actually be on camera with you chatting.
Yeah.
By means of introduction, I work for a conservative nonprofit here in Orange County, but I wasn't always conservative. I grew up actually very liberal, and I had a completely backwards look on beauty. Now, I was very much I experimented with sort of punk looks, goth, emo, all that sort of thing. I
Wow,
had
I didn't
short,
know that.
I had short green hair. I did orange hair, all of it. And it's because I was a Tumblr girl, you could say.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was very much influenced by the internet, and that is where I got my start, I would say, in politics. Is I was kind of radicalized on Tumblr. I started following a lot of social movements. Most of my friends on Tumblr were non-binary, transgender, people just rebelling against the gender norms, people rebelling against the beauty norms as well, especially everyone who was experimenting with their looks. Girls wanted to look like boys and boys wanted to look like girls, but don't put a label on any of it. Um, and so I eventually, coming from a liberal family, I ended up volunteering for liberals during the 2015 primaries. I was a Bernie Sanders volunteer,
Oh, okay.
and I went around touting Bernie as though he was the god. I had his little palm cards that I would hand out to people at school. At the time, I was a high school senior, and I was so excited to be handing out Bernie palm cards in my AP government class. And I had a gentleman take the card from me, and he looked at me and he said, Andrea, how are you going to achieve any of these things? How is Bernie going to pay for any of this? And that was kind of the start of my rude awakening. From there, it all went downhill, and I just, constantly started taking, as they say, those red pills, learning more and more about conservatism. And along the way, I actually realized how much I loved being a woman, how much I was really kind of lacking that feminine quality of my life, because honestly, I didn't feel very feminine at all. I obviously, I mentioned I had short green hair. I experimented with all different types of looks, but I didn't feel as though I could be a woman. Even though I'd put on makeup and, maybe I would wear shorts or a skirt or something like that that was more feminine, it didn't feel right to me.
Yeah. No, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I think maybe we could kind of start with talking a little bit more about what you think it means to be a conservative woman today. Now that you've, you know, throughout the process of your journey, I think like me hearing your story and then also what I've experienced in academia, I feel like on both sides of the political spectrum that the conservative woman of today is highly misunderstood. I think we still kind of have like a 1960s, 70s, 80s version of her, and we don't really under like I because I you and I have both gone to different political events time and time again, and I think it's
Mhm.
really funny that that is the person they're trying to figure out so much. So and then but then I was thinking about it and like that's it's actually kind of a good question. Who is the conservative woman of today? You know, what is really important to her? What are her values? And then so what do you think about that?
Sure. So that kind of brings to mind the whole movement online regarding the trad wife. And that's the goal that I think that a lot of conservative men online think that conservative women should be. Now, on the same at the same time, I do know that there are a lot of conservative men that know there's a balance and that there's definitely so much room for a woman to have a career and be the wife. But there's this whole meme online right now about the trad wife and how, you kind of have to be the homesteading woman. But that's not really the type of conservative woman that I know. And that's not the type of conservative woman that you are or any of the other ladies in my life. And it's sure not me either. I mean, it would be really cool to be able to homestead, churn my own butter, grow all my own food. But, in today's economy, I don't think I can even afford a parcel of land to be able to do so. So, to me, the conservative woman is more about being someone who's freedom loving, someone who believes in preserving what makes humans so amazing, so different from any other animal, someone who loves their country, maybe someone who loves their faith. They don't have to, conservative woman doesn't have to be a woman of faith, but it's also a woman who's really deeply unsatisfied with how the mainstream media is making us feel as women. And on that last note, I think it's interesting. The conservative woman as a freedom loving woman should be the liberal perspective. But at this point, the liberal perspective is not actually about freedom, even though they're the ones that say that, a woman can be anything that she wants to be. Because a woman can be anything she wants to be until she wants to be a mother or until she wants to embrace some of the traditional stereotypes. Um, and then that's a problem. That's a problem to them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if you have experienced this because, and I don't know if it's because I'm in academia, but sometimes I feel like it's unintentional, but I feel like I have a way of upsetting both sides, the
Mhm.
Republicans and the Democrats, because it's like I'm not progressive enough to one side and not conservative enough to another. And I think a lot of that has to do with my view on finances. Like I'm really big on women striving for financial independence because when you do not need a man for money, he has to be a good person. like
Mhm.
he has to step up to the plate. And I think a woman can be a lot more selective, strategic, but it's like, and then on top of that, you and I are in California. So I think that's also contributing to a change in relationship dynamics because as much like as I get older, I won't lie, the idea of being a stay-at-home mom sounds great some days. Because I really do want to be a mom. But then if I decide to stay in California, it's kind of like how do you find a man who can truly support all of that with how expensive things are. So, and this reminds me a lot of, like the 1930s and the Great Depression, where the gender, like the relationship dynamics are changing because of financial stress. But then another thing that I think I unintentionally kind of upset people with is my opinions on birth control. Because I was actually put on birth control when I was really, really young. And it
How
was
young?
like 16 and I
Oh
and I
my
wasn't
goodness.
sexually active or anything like that. I had really really bad migraines and that was, they were like it's a common thing. We think birth control helps. And I just like I see this a lot with the left more so where I understand the desire to want birth control, but I wish the left was more honest about the blemishes of birth control and what it's really doing to women's bodies. And then on top of that, the episode where Rupali was here, she started to talk a lot about how it impacts the type of men that a woman chooses.
Mhm.
Like, so I'm curious I think you've written a few articles about this. What do you think are the beauty and blemishes of birth control?
Yeah, and that's actually a topic that I've been learning so much more about, especially now that I've been a contributing writer for Evie Magazine. And Rupali, in your chat with her, spoke really a lot of truth to the fact that birth control hormonally changes a woman so, so much, to the fact that, I mean, it disrupts your natural hormones as they are,
Yeah.
it destroys your sex drive, honestly. It can give you long-term fertility issues. You might not be able to gain lean muscle mass. Every woman has different side effects on birth control, especially, the type of birth control it is. For you, maybe it was the pill. For me, it was the implant in my arm.
Okay.
And, I haven't spoken about it publicly a lot online, but it's one of the things that I've been considering writing about is my journey with hormonal birth control. Are you familiar with what the implant does versus the birth control pill?
No, I don't really know because I only ever did the pill, so I don't know the differences between them.
Yeah, so since it's implanted into your arm, it's this longer term um in the hormones are pushed into your body for a longer amount of time. And what it does, your body, along with estrogen, also creates progesterone. But what birth control does is it has progestin, and that's fake progesterone.
Oh,
And people have actually found that progestin can make you more depressed. If you're more depressed, if you have a lower sex drive, if you're not feeling your best in your body, you're not going to feel beautiful. I mean, I it's not that I didn't feel good because of birth control, but I do notice now that I've been off of it for a period of time that things just feel a whole lot better.
right.
And the whole problem with progestin is that it reduces your serotonin production. And the same thing happens with birth control pills. You're vitamin and mineral deficient. You can't produce as much folic acid in your body.
Mm.
You're not getting magnesium. You're not absorbing magnesium. So I agree, birth control is good for certain reasons, but it's damaging to a woman's psyche because it's enabled a new level of hookup culture. You have people who are obsessed with the idea of Netflix and chill. You can find that on t-shirts and on coffee mugs, and that's weird to tout that out in public, in my opinion. But the prevalence of dating apps or the mainstream media pushing safe one night stands in articles, it's all kind of do what you want, don't have any guilt or shame about it.
Mhm.
And the only thing that would traditionally hold a woman back is, well, would I be getting pregnant from sleeping around? It's not a problem if you're on birth control, if you're physically preventing yourself from getting pregnant. So I understand how it could be appealing to women nowadays to take it. But I mean, there's just a whole body of literature on post-birth control system.
Yeah.
Um, or I'm sorry, syndrome. I misspoke. Post-birth control syndrome.
Hmm.
That it changes your body, and it's such a journey to try to get your body back to where it was. I know for me, it's still an ongoing process, and I'm trying so many different things. I have maca root every day. I don't know if you know what maca is,
I
but
don't.
it's supposed to be good for your female hormones. There's a
Okay.
whole body of literature on maca root, and my OBGYN recommended I go and take it every single day, along with other things, just to try to get my hormones to be balanced after I had the birth control implant removed.
Mhm.
Um, so again, it's not that I don't think that women shouldn't have access to birth control. I just don't think it should be lauded as some sort of cure-all, or like for whether it's the migraines or people do it for cystic acne, painful cycles. There are so many other ways that you can solve these problems
Yeah.
without disrupting your hormones.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I'm not against birth control. And if a
Mhm.
woman wants that, I think that it should be, she should have that option. But I also think we really need to be like, we need to tell women what's really going to happen, how this is really going to impact their body, how it's going to impact them if they're consistently on it, how it's going to impact their dating life, the type of people that they date. um,
Exactly.
we don't talk about that. And I think that's honestly almost like criminal to push it on women at such a young age when they really don't need it. I really don't understand. And so many of my girlfriends, we all have the same story. Like, yeah, I was put on it really young. I didn't really need it. And then I just kept taking it because everyone else was. And then you go to college and just like that's not okay. And then even I don't know if like one of my girlfriends, she started trying to fix her hormones and everything, but she still wanted to be on birth control. So she looked into the copper IUD
Mm,
because it's supposed to be like the one that doesn't mess with your hormones. But that procedure is like incredibly painful. And we don't talk about how we don't give women anesthesia for that. Like every woman
I
I've
didn't
ever
know
talked
that.
to, yeah, every woman I've ever talked to who had that said it was the most excruciating pain ever. And people just kind of laugh it off. Like this is I feel like this is really, yes, you should have the option to have birth control, but why do women have to be put through such incredible pain to achieve, it's just like I just wish we could help women so that way, like, it's like they don't have to. I just feel like we're constantly dealing with pain
Yeah, and
all the
it's the
time.
standard. It's the standard from a young age because it's supposed to prevent us from painful cycles. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that every excuse that I've heard in the book for having birth control, the one that I hear the most often that, that I used was, well, I want to have less painful and more regular cycles. So, get on the implant. And it doesn't it doesn't account for the fact that you will probably end up feeling emotional pain later on because of it for one reason or another. For me, it's that, to this day, I still don't have a normal cycle. And I have been off of birth control for almost a year now. And that's scary. And that's something that if I hit that 1 year mark, even after trying so long to rebalance my hormones, if I hit that 1 year mark, well, I want to start writing about this. I want to start researching more and trying to find more women that have had these consistent, persistent problems where everything's out of whack and we
Yeah.
just accept it.
Yeah, I don't want to go like too conspiracy theorist, but I definitely have particular opinions about big pharma, and I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, me
But
as well. I mean, I won't push the narrative on you, but I totally believe that people profit off of us being sick. People,
I agree. Yeah.
whether it's the physicians themselves or the pharmaceutical companies, they're profiting off of the fact that we need to take more, that we need to do more. If we were able to hone in on our health from home, if we were better able to take care of ourselves naturally, they wouldn't be making money.
Hmm.
And that's a shame that it has to be that way.
Yeah. And then, so another thing I really wanted to talk with you about is, in a sense, kind of how like this battle over the body of women is something we don't like to think about that as something being at the core of a lot of cosmetic industries, because on the surface we think that a lot of cosmetic companies are on the side of women, right? And that they're here to help us, they're here to empower us. And I had a huge chapter of my life in the makeup industry. It's not that I don't love it, but as I've gotten older and looking at it from a historical perspective, there's quite a contradiction there. So maybe before we go into kind of the messaging, I'm curious if you've researched how like are different cosmetics impacting women's hormones too, not just birth control?
There's something to be said about there. People will say things about the types of chemicals in products. And I don't know exactly all of the details, but it has to do with, the silicones, the parabens. There are a couple other things that are considered hormone disruptors. And I'm no expert on the issue. It's something I should take a deeper dive into. But, it's one of the reasons why people will say things like, get off of typical deodorant. And I'm guilty of that to this day. I still use real, the deodorant that you're not supposed to use, the spray one, um, that has all those bad chemicals in it. That's probably disrupting my hormones even further. But it's the same thing. What you put on your body is the skin is your biggest organ, and so it absorbs things so well. If you're putting so many chemicals onto it all the time, you're bound to have some problems.
Yeah. And I'm the same. I still use the one that you're not supposed to, but it's because I feel like it's the only one that works. Like I would love to be able to do the more natural, cosmetics all the way around, deodorant included, but it doesn't work. So hopefully someone can figure that one out.
I agree. And one thing that I've thought about is that it's the difference between, for deodorant, especially antiperspirant and deodorant. I realized the reason why I am so stuck on what I'm using is because I like the whole not sweating thing from antiperspirant, but I don't actually have a problem with the deodorant part of it because naturally I guess my sweat glands have adjusted to this thing. And this is such a tangent. I don't know if you're familiar with the herb fenugreek, but
No.
okay, there's this herb called fenugreek, and it is amazing for women for their fertility. A lot of women actually use it when they're trying to increase their capacity to breastfeed.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it's traditionally used in some Indian cooking. It has this really sweet maple syrup smell. And when you consume it, it actually kind of makes you smell like maple syrup, um,
Oh.
just a little bit naturally. So I'll have these moments where I'm at the gym and I'll be lifting weights. And in the past, when I've, been lifting weights and I smell myself, I would smell sweat. Nowadays, maybe it's a psychological thing, but I don't think it is because other women online can attest to this.
Hmm.
I smell a little bit of that maple syrup smell. So if I could just
Oh,
get over the hump of not using the antiperspirant and being okay with the sweat part of it, um, I have the smell part of it covered.
I had no idea that was a thing. That's
I
awesome.
love I love these random things about herbs and all that sort of traditional medicine. I find it so fascinating, and it's a lost art for so many women nowadays.
No, and I completely agree with that. And my family kind of teases me a little bit because like as I've gotten older, I'm a lot more conscious, aware of what I'm putting on my body and what is in the makeup, the skincare products, hair, everything. And I've definitely gotten into like the more, kind of like Eastern medicine, herbs. I'm very like my goal or a promise that I made to myself when I started working on my PhD was that I was going to get stronger, like mentally, physically, spiritually. I wanted to emerge stronger throughout the process. So for a while there, I had this little phase where I went like full organic everything. And my sister kind of joked, she's like, you were in like your Kourtney Kardashian phase where you were like everything
Yeah.
organic and I'm checking everything. But I liked that about Kourtney Kardashian, and like it's also part of it too was not just for myself, but like how you mentioned that the skin, that's our largest organ. And I I really started to change my makeup routine, all of the products that I was using because I was kind of worried. I'm like, is it impacting my hormones? Is it impacting other things? So that change was not only for personal reasons, but because I really want to be a mom one day. So that was another thing too. I'm like, if I'm lucky enough to be a wife, to be a mom, what products will I have in my house? Will they be healthy for my family? So that was also something kind of shifting my what I was choosing to buy.
Totally. And honestly, I have changed a lot of skincare products that I use to try to find the things, even if they are still, a chemical product, because so much skincare is, I don't necessarily feel as though I can only use the, just simple natural products. I'll try to find the products that are made with the simplest ingredients that are still chemical. Like I love The Ordinary. I'm sure you know their products pretty well because it's just
Mhm.
super simple stuff. And a lot of Korean beauty also does very stripped down recipes of things that incorporate a lot of natural products that are genuinely good and nourishing for your skincare.
Mhm. I love that. I'm probably going to keep going with my Kourtney Kardashian phase too. It'll probably
Please
only
do.
Yeah. Well, now I'm kind of curious if we combined makeup and politics, do you think, well, because there's a history of women using makeup to send political messages, but now what something we talked about earlier, I think we're kind of living through this strange new chapter of women are still doing that, but it's kind of like who is really sending the message? Who really has control now? Do women have control over the cosmetic industry, or does the cosmetic industry have control over them? What do you think?
I completely see it starting with women using cosmetics to send political messages because it's not the object itself that has the message. It's what you're doing with the object.
Yeah.
But nowadays, what it is, it's kind of more the marketers who are sending very deeply liberal messages, honestly, through women's cosmetics. And you can just see it if you subscribe to any sort of email marketing from cosmetic industries. The first one that comes to mind for me is Ulta because I shop Ulta instead of Sephora. I'm sorry, I know you were more of a Sephora girl
Oh,
back in the
yeah.
day.
It's all good.
Um, I somehow still shop at the wokest one, which is Ulta. They'll have these marketing campaigns about the headline will say the vegan formulas or this is black beauty or this is conscious beauty. I think it was back earlier this year during Black History Month, Ulta themselves actually decided to put out a big press release saying that they were going to spend $50 million this year on diversity initiatives, including something that's more like an affirmative action sort of program to put more Black owned products on the shelf and put more money towards marketing Black products. And that alone is not an issue at all because diversity in cosmetics is great. If I was a Black woman in America and I was being forced to use products that, hair products that ruined my natural curl pattern, I'd be livid
Yeah.
because I know I don't necessarily have that type of curl pattern, but I know that products that dry out natural curls ruin your hair. So I understand where they're coming from wanting to see more diversity on the shelves. There Everyone has different skin types. You could be dry skin, oily, or combo, and some of it has to do with your heritage, with your background. But at
Hmm.
the same time, it's also veering into this territory where you're almost expected to be the woke makeup company or to be the woke vendor of makeup products like Ulta. And Ulta is definitely not alone in this one. The diversity initiatives go pretty far. I think it was a lady named Amanda Ensing who she was a conservative makeup artist on Instagram, a conservative beauty influencer. and she did a collaboration with Sephora, and she was not afraid to be an unapologetic Christian conservative American, and mind you, also a Latina woman.
Mm.
But Sephora dropped her. I think this was last year or the year before. Sephora dropped her because she's conservative, and she was just left wondering, hey, when did makeup get so political? When did this become a thing? But it's bad. You know, you also had, when the BLM riots happened, all of the woke makeup companies were standing in solidarity with the rioters who destroyed small businesses. And those big box stores, big businesses, Sephora, Ulta, if you shop at Nordstrom's for your cosmetics, if you shop at JCPenney, wherever it is, those businesses have so much money behind them and they can survive riots. Your small mom and pop shops can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so effective to start in women's culture, and I think that's what marketers do. They start by trying to shift the narrative with women because women set the trend for what direction our society is going in.
Yeah.
And at this point, to me, it just feels more like marketers are trying to kind of shove diversity down our throats instead of letting actual diversity and real good multiculturalism, which is intuitive, shine through. It's more about quotas and filling statistics artificially.
Yeah, no, those are all such amazing points, and I'm glad that they're included in the interview because one of the main goals of the show is really to preserve stories, viewpoints that are at risk of being left out of the history books. So I love that you brought that up. And like you were mentioning earlier, I love diversity in the makeup industry. Like even like when I was a makeup artist, I don't want to date myself too much, but this was before, like for my African American clients, I was doing makeup at a time when there wasn't foundation in enough shades. And then so like when Rihanna came out with Fenty and had all of these new like different shades of foundation, I thought that was amazing. Like that's great because then more and more people can engage with makeup. But now we're, like you said, we're kind of veering into this strange political territory with the cosmetic industries where it's like, yeah, they're kind of on the surface, it seems like they're pushing that wokeness, or it's kind of contradictory. They're pushing diversity, but then there's certain things that are not okay. Diversity of appearance, but not diversity of thought. Um, and then to me, it's kind of like, is it really you pushing diversity, or are you just trying to control women? Is this just a flat out uh, attempt to control the ladies? Because throughout world history, the female body really has been kind of perceived as communal property. And without realizing it, people tend to project their deepest fears and anxieties onto the bodies of women, all women. So it's like, is it really diversity that you're trying to push here? Because even if you look at the messages with the marketing, they're, like the thing that stands out to me is you'll see all sorts of different slogans that are hinting at the way you naturally are is good enough, but it's not a product that is suggesting something about the way you naturally are is not good enough. So
Sure.
that's where I'm kind of like, we're in this weird middle ground where it's kind of like, who has control over the cosmetic industries right now? That's
I,
what I can't really figure out.
I really do feel like it is the marketers. And then in another kind of backwards way, have you noticed how a lot of male-owned companies actually end up doing really well in makeup? One of the things I think about all the time is, you know, makeup artists like Jeffree Star they are just loved by the media. And you don't see as much about Charlotte Tilbury out there in media, in marketing. I
Yeah.
know her products still are absolutely adored by people, but I see people pushing Jeffree Star like there's no other. So male leaders in the cosmetic industry shake things up.
Mhm.
And so is it now okay to start allowing men into the field of cosmetics? And it's okay because it's a gay man. Um, it kind of reminds me of, like, you have the definition of what was once the women's cosmetic industry. Kind of the words are changing, just like how women are now, we're now birthing people, or we're bleeding people.
Mm.
I'm noticing that words on packaging are becoming um, way more gender neutral so that men can use it too. Because you have so many men nowadays, gay men or straight men, that, experiment with makeup, um, trying all these looks out. And so the marketing has to be inclusive of that. And again, we're not trying to be conspiracy theorists here on your podcast, but it's just curious to me that you see this sort of shift happening at the same time that you see biological men championing women's sports, or our newest Supreme Court justice pick refusing to define what a woman is. It's
Mhm.
almost as though you're kind of isolating what the default is, like the woman in essence. You're isolating the woman who just wants to be a woman because she's not buying into the Marxist ideology. That's just what it is to me. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you are hitting on a really strong point that it seems like those in control of the marketing are the ones really calling the shots over the cosmetic industry right now. Because even if they were honest, we would tell people that sometimes certain products are exactly the same at the molecular level. There's just a change in fragrance depending on certain brands. So, people tend to look down on like drugstore makeup. Sometimes I'm not kidding. It really is the same thing as some of those high end brands. No one wants to tell you that because it doesn't look good for the high end brand, but it is. But and I'm not trying to say that you know, I, I support, like, if you create your business and you get creative with the marketing, that's great. But now we're getting to a point where it's actually having a true impact on women's physical health, their mental health. And now I'm kind of like, this is getting a tad bit dangerous sometimes, because the things women will do to reach a certain societal standard, that's not okay either. Like, if you want to have fun with makeup or any cosmetic product, I think that's great. I think you should. But then this is where my more conservative side comes in, and I'm like, but the way you are really is good enough. You are enough. And I want women to hear that. If you want to have fun with makeup, do that, but do it because you wanted to do it, not because you feel societal pressure to do it. And the other thing we talked about too, or that I'm curious to get your insight on, how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting that kind of struggle that's going on in the cosmetic industries?
You know, what I've found very funny is I've still worn makeup all the time during the pandemic, during lockdowns, I would still put on a full face of makeup because there is something so good for your brain when you make yourself look good. There's something to be said about putting on a good outfit, doing your hair, putting on makeup. I mean, studies have actually found that doing those types of things, it can help you perform better on tests if you're in school, help you perform better at your job. You feel more confident, gives you a little serotonin boost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so throughout all of the lockdowns, I would still do enough self-care because I think true self-care can really change your mental state. And I did not want to feel bad during the pandemic,
Yeah.
for um for me, I was put into lockdown because of my family not wanting me to leave the house. And eventually I was able to kind of escape that. But I was really restricted from being able to see people. So it really meant something to me to be able to put on a nice face and makeup, put on some earrings, wear a cute top, even if I wasn't really going anywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too is I think the economy taking such a hit and our reliance on social media for just basic entertainment and having some type of connection with each other, I think that also had a huge impact on cosmetic industries because that was, and for me personally, that was the first time that I started to see that kind of fight for the power in cosmetic industries because a lot of women, like you and I, we still love to play with makeup even during the pandemic. But I had lots of days where like I wasn't going anywhere. I don't need to wear this. And then if you multiply that, the cosmetic companies were really hurting during the pandemic. And then there was a huge wave of people on Instagram and TikTok starting to show what was going on with cosmetics. And then we had this increase in class action lawsuits because people were having reactions to certain products or it was exposed that they had a really harmful ingredient. And then I feel like that was the first time in a while that more so the ladies were kind of taking back that power over the cosmetic industries and being like, I want you to create a better product because otherwise I'm not going to buy it. And
See,
the companies were hurting.
and you had those ladies that wanted to reform the makeup industry, but then you also had the ladies on the other hand who said, screw that, I'm done with makeup entirely. And that's something
Mm-hmm.
I was recently learning a lot about, which is the whole trend for goblin mode.
Goblin
I'm
mode.
not sure if you've seen anything about that, but it was a big thing on TikTok, Twitter. It's just, a silly social movement, people embracing their inner, being a goblin, essentially,
I
not
never
dressing
heard
up.
about this. Oh my gosh.
It's super silly, but it's real. It's the people who, just really let themselves go because they didn't have to go anywhere.
Hmm.
And so, I think a couple of the people on TikTok were talking about how they were feeling like a goblin because they would, stay up until 3 a.m. On the sofa in pajamas, eating Doritos and just really letting themselves go. And one of the goblin mode things I was reading about was a woman trying to adjust back into the office after having let herself go for a while and how she felt so judged by having gained weight during the pandemic. And I really think that the lockdowns, it affected people so much more deeply mentally than we'll know for a little while longer until people start getting back into society again.
Yeah.
But you're right with the makeup industry kind of changing for the better, but then you also have the people who were disregarding actual self-care because it felt more empowering that to them because they're working from home and it's okay if I smell bad, look bad, no one's going to judge me, I'm at home.
Yeah. And that's like this is kind of going on a tangent, but this is something that sometimes like I feel like there's a gray area here with women in the conservative side. I won't name names on like the leading ladies that I don't agree with. But like I with the whole like women's weight, and trying and yes, like when if you for those who gained weight during the pandemic and then some of them kind of chose to stay in that and then others were trying to get out of it. Let me put it this way. I feel like sometimes women on the right are not as understanding about the struggle for some women with their weight. And I'm not saying that it's like I get the body positivity movement, and I think that's great. But even they do go a little bit too far sometimes. It's just such a complex thing, and women have so many deeply rooted emotions connected to their image that I think it should be more so about promoting health and developing healthy routines that fit you, and not so much of a size. Like that you have to be like stick figure thin because even if a woman is trying to get better and trying to get thinner, but she hears that sometimes from the ladies on the right, and that doesn't like that's very discouraging. So I guess I just don't I don't know. I feel like a lot of women on the right, like they attack the body positivity movement that's more so connected with the left. And I wish we wouldn't do that. I wish we would stop pinning women against each other and maybe, like why can't we focus on teaching women about health, helping them how to cook the right way, how to pick, like proper nutrition, exercise. And on top of that, like from what we talked about in the beginning of the episode, I didn't learn until recently that really women should be doing different types of exercises depending on where they're at with their cycle. They should be eating different types of foods. No one ever taught me that until my late 20s, so sometimes I don't like how politics gets involved in that discussion. And I wish we were just much more supportive of women on their health journey rather than pressuring them to be a certain size. And it's like, that's,
Totally,
yeah.
totally agree. And that's one of the things that I've found is so beautiful about the community of women that I work with at Evie is that it really is more about actually nourishing your body, practicing good health because you want to be a good woman who can hopefully, produce good children if you want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is that there are two, sides to it where there's the conservative woman who will promote being skinny to be skinny, who might want to aspire to look like your very stick thin Fox News blonde. And I'm sure that the ladies on Fox who are that image, I'm sure they might be well and healthy. They might be, but you also have women who end up getting eating disorders, trying to look a certain way.
Yeah.
And I know from my perspective entirely, I was so obsessed with trying to be a smaller version of myself instead of being a healthier version of myself.
Yeah.
And now that I'm trying, I'm still working out hard and I'm still eating well, but I'm not pushing my body in ways that it shouldn't be pushed. And I'm eating in ways that nourish me. And I think that's what, honestly, I think that's what a true conservative woman would believe is, actually taking really good care of yourself, not to be the skinniest version that you could be, not to be the model-esque version. And sure, some models have those bodies naturally, but not all of us are going to have that shape. Not, it's just not possible.
Yeah. And then too, also, this is like another tangent, but this also kind of bugs me how a lot of people, I feel like they make this assumption that conservatives in general don't care about the environment. And that really bugs me because I'm like, I know a lot of conservatives who care about the environment, like real a lot. Like that, I guess like my whole thing with the conservative or the right versus the left, like I just like, and going back to the original or one of our first questions of like, who is the new conservative woman? To me, I think it's a woman who does not want to be put in a box, wants to be, like you said, to be free, to think freely, to have her core values, be respectful of that, and not be judged for it, but still have the freedom to do the research, think for herself, approach each issue individually, but she still has those core values that mean a lot to her. I just don't like that. And maybe I feel it a lot more in academia, but or maybe it's just me being kind of a smart aleck, but I don't like being like when people try to put you in a box. That drives me nuts.
No, I 100% agree. And I think that based on your history, based on my history, you can't really fit women like us into a box. We have such unique stories and we're not alone. I know from all the people I've met through my work, from, the day job that I have and the evening job that I have, I meet so many women who have different walks of life that, we aren't going to be the trad wife. We're not going to be the career woman, but we're going to be a happy mix. We're going to be something kind of in the middle, and it's all because it's nuanced. I mean, things are just not black and white like that.
Yeah. And there, to go back to the interview that I did with Rupali, there was this one moment in our conversation where we started to basically ask the question, like, what is the story after feminism? And to me, I feel like that's what the new conservative woman of today, like, that's where she's focused. And I think that's why the left and the right are having such a hard time figuring out who that woman is, because they, I think, and this is me again being a critical historian, but a lot of the prominent political figures who have been in there far too long, in my opinion, I think they like to keep women against each other and in these kind of archetypes that they set up for us in the 60s and 70s. And to me, the conservative woman of today is just way ahead of that. Like, I appreciate what feminism did. I don't like all aspects of it. Maybe some aspects I do, but I'm more so focused on what's the next thing? Like, how do we get to solutions for the issues, the problems that women are dealing with right now? I don't want to be stuck in that dynamic anymore of the right versus the left woman. I feel like we're past that. Why can't we move past that?
We're absolutely past that. What number wave of feminism are we on at this point anyway?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
I
I don't know.
don't either. All I know is that I agreed with the initial idea of it, and it's gotten a little too far for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for being here on the Makeup Historian. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to help us preserve a different part of history. And you are always, always welcome here on the show.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I love our conversations together, and this was such a fun little thing to do with you, and I look forward to chatting again soon.